come from. Here it is. Anyway, again, thanks a lot, Larry. I've got 3 parts to this presentation, and they're designed to give an audience a feeling of where we are with our growing private space enterprise tourism industry. That's the first part. There's a real-world business growing, and there's many opportunities for people to get directly involved. The second part looks into the future, into orbital super yachting and cruise lines in space and racing on the moon. And part of what we do at our Space Tourism Society is we envision 20 years in the future. We've been doing it for 30 years, so we've actually done it. And I'll talk about how important it is to do envisioning and so forth. And then you'll be the second audience in the universe to actually see some material on our Mars World project for Las Vegas. A proposal, it's not yet funded, for a very large Mars future-themed entertainment conference. But let's just go through this. I'm going to go through kind of quickly. Between changing, we'll have time for questions, and we're going to have plenty of time for questions when this is all over. So it says up there in capital letters. My most important point for the audiences that I usually deal with is that we are in the space experience business. Of course, Astrocamp is exactly in that. And that is what's really unique about our focus. We're not engineers, although we have plenty of engineers, plenty of scientists, plenty of physicists. But our focus is what is the uniqueness and the quality of the off-road experience. And what is the elegance of it? We talk about beauty, we talk about art, we talk about hairstyle, which is emerging interest as more and more people actually go to space from a greater diversity of backgrounds. And since I'm going to get into some wild stuff, please take a second and just read this. So, that's my concept and design for a real orbital super yacht. Her name is Destiny. That's 300 foot long. It's all inflatable sections assembled in Earth orbit. The very center has this float sphere, and we're going to talk about this quite a bit later in the presentation. But I'm quite convinced we will actually assemble this within the next 15 years. It'll cost about $5 billion. And of course, ocean-going mega super yachts exist for pride and prestige and ego, social standing, branding, and so forth. So those same motivations, which are not cash-oriented, will work for us having an orbital super yacht industry with yacht clubs and yacht racing and so on and so forth. The technologies we create and develop in creating these things will help us have a larger audience being able to go and enjoy space. I've been doing this for a long time. 1982, I put together this image. And actually, we didn't have computers then, believe it or not. At least personal computers. So I had to cut this out of a magazine. It was really difficult. But I wanted to get across an idea that the cruise line industry is the ideal model for the space tourism industry. And if you really think about it, and I can get into nauseating detail of why this is true. Cruise ships are very technical. They exist to take people out into an extreme environment, the ocean, to have a great time and to make money. So that model can be translated into orbit and eventually lunar orbit. A little bit of my background. As a space architect, I'm one of the first, starting in 1978. I've designed stuff that's flown in space, stuff that's been built in Antarctica, stuff that's been built and operates underwater. And this is called extreme design, where we create things that are put in places with extreme environments. And we do things where if we screw up, people die. So we have to be very careful. So I made most of my money over the years in the entertainment design world, where I'm designing themed entertainment resorts or theme parks or multiple simulation projects. And I do a lot of consulting on movies and TV and so forth. And if you combine extreme design for the authenticity and the technology knowledge with entertainment design, you get what I call immersive simulation design. So that my designs are actually pretty unique because I'm a real space guy doing entertainment projects, which pay the bills for the space stuff. But more and more of those are converging together. And eventually we're having our space hotel, our space cruise lines, and it will be a merger of real space and space experience entertainment. So far, I'm also a real estate developer and have $310 million built of my original concepts. I didn't do the last design work on the bottom two, but I did designs for Space World. We built a couple $100 million over 91. So I've got a pretty good track record of originating ideas and actually getting them funded and built. And we'll talk about that later with Mars World, and also, as I said earlier, why envisioning fantastic things and putting teams together and making them happen is a lot of fun and very profitable. And I wrote the first book published in the U.S. on space tourism, and it involved a lot of strategic planning for our space industry and aerospace industry. And we're really going through a fundamental transformation, not transition, but transformation in our space industries, from the mega aerospace companies and just government contracts to private space enterprise, leading a lot of ways. How many people here have heard of SpaceX? Wow, almost everybody. Okay, well, Elon and his crew is doing great. They have now over $5 billion, $5 billion the B word, in contracted manifest already. So it's very interesting. And I'm a futurist, in that I always like to say, look 20, 30, even 40 years down the line. And so far, a pretty good track record of saying space tourism is going to become the largest industry off world, and I guarantee you it will. Immersive simulations, kind of what you're doing with Astrocamp, Space Camp, some of our things, where you immerse yourself in the environment, in the activities, the goals, the aspirations. And in doing so, it's a very good vacation because your goals become that of a fun situation versus your normal life situation. And of course, space sports, we'll talk about a little later, is going to be a massive media-oriented thing. And green space, how do we make our space industry more green? The buildings we build, the rocket fuels we use, how do we make our spaceships, particularly larger and larger ones, and moon bases, and certainly Mars, biospheres? So we're recirculating the air and generating food and oxygen and all kinds of new stuff. But what is the space experience? Let's explore this just for a couple of minutes. First off, obviously, we have a gorgeous, beautiful planet. And that's pretty much one of the first comments people who've flown in space, astronauts, cosmonauts, private space tourists, have said, I can't believe how many beautiful colors we have on Earth. I mean, how colorful Earth really is. And of course, everyone loves to take photographs of their space experience. You have an Earthrise, or sunrise or sunset every 45 minutes, so you have to get adjusted to that cycle. And of course, the most unique, the most beautiful thing is zero gravity, the ability to fly, to float, to dance in the air. And that's what's the most magical part of the space experience, is floating and being in this unique environment. People take space floats. I always hated, even as a kid, I always wondered why they call it space walk, and you don't walk in space. Romance in space. Since we have a young one here, I won't get into that too much. That's a good word. Lunar flyby. Space adventures. How many people prefer space adventures? Not as many, but it doesn't count. Space Adventures is a company that's a tourist company that's hosted the 7 people who've flown in space as private space travelers. Dennis Tito, my good friend, was the first who flew in 2001, paid $12 million. Now it costs you $45 million, and actually prices have actually gone up. And the founder of Cirque du Soleil is the most recent 2009 private space traveler. There would have been more. There's a whole line of people who can afford it and do it. It's just the space station was completed. We have 6 astronauts on board, and you can only have 6 people because there's only escape vehicles for 6 people. So when we have Bob Bigelow Aerospace Space Hotel, which I've helped design, should be in orbit within 5 years. We're going to have many, many more people going, and another space hotel, and eventually my yachts. But Space Adventures is planning a lunar flyby, just like they did in Apollo 8, where 2 passengers each paying $150 million. And they've sold 1 ticket already. At the end of this year, pretty soon they'll announce the 2nd ticket they sold. And 1 cosmonaut pilot. So the next time humanity sees a live Earthrise, which is extraordinary, it'll be totally funded by private enterprise. Earthrise. To me, this is one of the most important things humanity's ever done, the ability to go to the moon and see the Earth rising above the rim, because it gave us, for the first time in our history, a chance to really realize we're a place in space, that Earth is a place, and it's our place. So going outward gives you a great sense of more inward views. These are the people I mentioned that have actually flown. One fellow, Charles Simonyi, has flown twice to the International Space Station. And Charles, we've been talking about the yacht since he owns a 300-foot-long luxury yacht and has been to space, so he really gets the space yacht idea. And when I talk about space, I'm always talking about the Earth-Moon as a business zone. That's very important. The moon is extraordinary that we have it for many, many reasons. But it's such an interesting place, and we're really going to have a huge amount of tourism and sports and science there. Now, in our Space Tourism Society's definition of the space experience, it's actually pretty broad. And in fact, this triangle really helps define it. So you have real space experiences, Earth-based simulations like an Astrocamp, a Mars world, visiting the Kennedy Visitor Center, the National Space Museum, movies and TVs, games, virtual world. There's a synergy between all of these. And during a lifetime, if you're into space, it's a niche market like anything else, you can actually go up from seeing movies and TV to immersive simulations, zero-gravity flights, suborbital flights pretty soon, and real space. So as you go through life, you can go through ever more authentic, real, more dangerous, more expensive experiences to the ultimate of actually leaving Earth. That means we've got a big business that we're building, an industry's growing with great diversity, and there's tons of room for all kinds of players, designers, finance people, marketing, music, all that. So real space, suborbital flights, zero gravity, immersive simulations, virtual world. We've actually done all of this except suborbital flights, which should be started towards the end of next year. The Mars Science Laboratory on Mars is doing a fantastic job. The nickname is Curiosity. And when it landed, there was just huge enthusiasm around the world. Hundreds of millions of people congratulating NASA and science and these heroic, and this was really, really hard to do. But our ambassador is out there exploring and doing real hardcore science for us. And you'll see a fleet of more robots going out and eventually people following. The space business pioneers, I'm going to get into this quite a bit in a minute, but Paul Allen, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, Bob Bigelow, Elon Musk, they all made their money outside of the space industry, in software, computers, real estate, all these areas. But their passion growing up as kids was always space and science fiction. So once they became extraordinarily wealthy, and they're all extraordinarily smart, they decided to put their time and energy and reputation into space enterprise and space companies. Paul Allen's building the largest aircraft that's ever been built. He's going to be dropping rockets from 50,000 feet that actually go up into Earth's orbit, eventually tourism rockets. SpaceX, as most of you know, is now doing extraordinarily well, supplying the International Space Station. Jeff Bezos, from day one, he was developing a rocket system with vertical takeoff and vertical landing because his passion is lunar development. And he has a deal with Bob Bigelow, who wants to have the first hotel on the moon. And they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars in these dramatic, exciting quests. This is Bob's design for the inflatable structures that all come together with a hard hub. On the side there, you can see one of the modules, the test module in Earth's orbit. He's the only private citizen in the world that has real space missions going on. They're unmanned, but he has 2 of these test modules in Earth's orbit right now. And if you'll take a second, if you could read some of the quotes from Branson. This was back in 2004. So pretty amazing. He's done an extraordinary job of popularizing private space enterprise and tourism industry, and he's really got some long-term vision, which we can't get into right now, but in a few years you're going to hear some pretty amazing things. What they're going to be doing is suborbital flights. They're building aircraft and spacecraft, and they're testing them right now. Larry mentioned the terminal building. That's the one I created and designed for the Mojave Air Spaceport. That's about a $95 million project. It'll be super green with that giant roof as a solar collector, and how we're going to manage the smart part of the building. So that's what's interesting is you have real space architecture, real spaceships and moon bases and Mars mission planning. Then you have the entertainment side. There's kind of a middle ground, which is spaceports, which are actually on Earth in normal gravity, but they actually service our growing space industry. That's kind of a cool structure. X-Corps is planning a similar suborbital flights, but the pilot and the passenger right up front in the cabin. The Russians, never underestimate them. They're working on their own space hotel project. And how many of you heard of the Red Bull, jump from the edge of space? Most people here. They got huge media attention for it. They spent about $40 million. And you can imagine space sports getting ever more extreme, eventually orbital skydiving, suborbital, racing on the moon we'll talk about. And what's great about this is all these mega corporations have vast capital and media resources, and they're competing like crazy, so they want to get eyeballs on their messaging. And space happens to be the sexy, exciting, never-ending frontier. So that's going to serve us very well. These are the new kids on the block. Planetary resources, they want to go mine asteroids and eventually mine the moon, and they're testing the legal regulatory systems. Can you own extraterrestrial materials? It's an interesting question. But they brought the number of billionaires directly invested in the space enterprise industry up to 10. Our friend Jim Cameron, my friend, he's actually working on it. So if you take a second, just read this list. This is an extraordinary list when you think of the pedigree and the industries that these guys have started. When the business community sees this list, they can't help but going, wow, if these are some of the wealthiest, smartest guys around, and there's 10 of them now working in space, there's got to be something there, and there is. I remember 25 years ago, we dreamed back then that someday one billionaire would show up. Of course, we always thought it would be Bill Gates, because that was the only billionaire name we knew. So he hasn't gotten involved, but we got these guys. There's 4 more coming online next year. This is an interesting example. I'm sitting on the lab, and Frank Drake creates the SETI Institute. David Marcus is the president of PayPal. There's my good friend Buzz Aldrin. And in late June, we launched, believe it or not, PayPal Galactic. PayPal is putting real money into hardcore research in the science and mathematics and 3Ds and a bunch of other odds and ends to actually be the company that can actually do off-world transactions. Now, this is a perfect example of a company who's not in space, but sees space as a future business opportunity. They also see it as something that keeps them in the edge of pioneering. And that way they're keeping their best talent, their best employees, and so forth. But they're very serious about this. We eventually are going to have so much happening in Earth's orbit and in the moon, we're going to need a Space Guard service modeled after the United States Coast Guard, doing the same things for space that they do for the oceans. Rescue, medical, standardization, environmental issues, eventually policing of orbit. So that's what we're doing, is looking at this infrastructure and translating it to the off-world environment, and that's accelerating quite a bit. So again, if you look at space from the standpoint of these 3 mediums, real space, Earth space, and movies and TV, the synergy moves them all forward quickly. And again, my perspective is that we're in the space experience business. So Larry, can we get the next one up? All right. So, any quick questions?
Wasn't the lunar flyby mission that you mentioned based on the Zond mission that the Russians proposed in the 60s? Or it sounded
it's a little bit more based on the Apollo mission, because we really understand those technologies and so forth. But basically, you go out around the moon, go around it, do a flyby, and come right back to Earth, and that's what they're basically planning. Now, this is the second part, which talks a little bit more about the envisioning and visionary kind of stuff. And I think it's very important to envision a future, and also to envision a fun, exciting, amazing future. And why not? That's what we want. That's what we want to work towards. We've got so many zombie movies and other negative things going on that let's counter that by coming up with great ideas for the future. And of course, Jules Verne, Walt Disney, Gerard O'Neill. Is this still working? It is. So believe it or not, Jules Verne envisioned the lunar mission taking off from Florida. The United States would do it, but he envisioned it just at the end of the Civil War, 1865. Amazing, all the stuff he came up with. Walt Disney was a great pioneer in helping to launch the beginnings of the American space program with his TV shows, and actually convincing President Kennedy, there's a whole major story there, to make the moon speech that we're going to the moon. So this is a direct example of science fiction and entertainment having a profound influence on real space. And in the early 70s, Gerard O'Neill, a physicist from Princeton, proposed that we build these large space colonies, 10,000 person, in Earth's orbit, and we would build solar power satellites, and we'd be able to have massive exploration, and so forth. And that was a grand vision It really launched what's called the high frontier, looking at space as our frontier. Today, this huge cruise ship has almost 10,000 people on it when you count the crew. And some of the crew live on the ship for at least half of the year. So while this is an Earth-based project, we have large ships that have almost 10,000 people on them, not too different from a space colony because of people living on it. And of course, the movie 2001. When I was a kid, this came out, and I was astonished and wondered who designed all these amazing, amazing things. And what they did was profound in terms of their design and ideas. But if you look at this for a second, this is 1968. What does it look like? It's amazing how science fiction, and of course we all know the stories of Star Trek and with the communicator and a bunch of other odds and ends, forecast things that eventually happen or inspire young people, men and women, to go into the areas of science and engineering and make these things happen. So storytelling is a great important part. Now for the yachts, this is what I call P3, pride, prestige, and felicity. If you have enough of those, you can do anything. This was amazing. That's the first $1 billion yacht. It's huge, 600 feet, just about 600 foot. Russian billionaire had this built. We actually saw this when we were at the Santa Monica Pier recently. So we crossed the line of $1 billion private yacht. But it's not too hard to think. These mega corporations are ultra wealthy people financing, particularly over a long period of time, a $4 or $5 billion orbital super yacht. This is one of Paul Allen's yachts. Oh, he loved the helicopters. And I modeled my orbital super yacht design after this. I literally studied this in the floor plans and translated those for the yacht. So 10 passengers, 6 crew members, and this one they have 20 crew members. An inflatable structure. We've been talking about inflatable architecture since the late 70s. And as I mentioned, Destiny is an inflatable ship. Isn't that a pretty spaceship? And that's designed to actually be built. We're getting into more engineering drawings and getting more companies involved. And this is a long, long process. I've been working on this for 10 years. But that's part of the long-term research. 10 passengers, 6 crew members. Those beautiful sails collect solar energy, migrate the energy to charging stations, radiate heat away, which is very hard to do in a vacuum, and looks super cool. Isn't that an amazing ship? Wow. The very center, almost the center, is this 60 foot in diameter. This room's probably close to 60 feet. Float sphere. It's just an open volume to float, to dance in the air, to have events and parties and all kinds of fun stuff. So the float sphere is very important. On Earth yachts, the hot tub, for many reasons, and again, with the young person here, we won't get into all that. But if you want to have a hot tub in zero gravity, you have some interesting challenges. All fluids form a sphere in zero gravity because gravity isn't there to force them down. No problem. We have the hot sphere. That center part is where the gizmos are that make the bubbles and the heat. There's gyros to keep it where you want it. That comes out, it's assembled inside that large float sphere or in the forward part of Destiny, which is a big open area. And then the water robots come out, put water on it, and then you have your basically hot tub in space. Now if you hit it really hard, little parts will go off, robots will have to go get that. But you can relax having your hot tub experience looking away from Earth at the beautiful stars and moon are looking toward Earth. A wedding inside of the float sphere. That's going to be amazing. You can imagine the captain, marrying this couple. The only problem is she looks like a very nice girl, and she probably shouldn't marry. My artist is a little out there. And of course, one of the core things when you're in space is people spend an enormous amount of time in private areas, just floating and looking at Earth or looking at the stars, and just thinking about where they are and what does it all mean. And many people have profound and enhanced experiences going off the world. Yacht racing. We just had the America's Cup, right? Pretty amazing stuff. And the technology and the money they spend on this stuff is amazing. Well, we're basically going to have races on the moon. We have the Baja 2000. And take a second, please read this. The financing on this is $1 billion, is $50 million over 20 years. So, Can you imagine you have to have, here's the rule so far, at least 3 vehicles, manned vehicles, around the entire equator of the moon. $1 billion grand prize. And you could imagine the moon is our greatest billboard. We all see it. Everyone in the world sees it. And you can imagine some of these mega corporations cannot resist, we're already working on movie projects for this, having something like that. Could you imagine winning the Great Lunar Rover Race? But it's those imaginative things, those throwing those things out there and working on them in a logical way that eventually they happen. I assure you, you will happen. Now, let's take another little step. Immersive simulations, like we have with Astrocamp or Space Camp. It doesn't matter the theme. This is Civil War reenactment. These guys are totally crazy guys. Renaissance Pleasure Fair. Way too much time. You can go special ops. So it doesn't matter the theme. What matters is you immerse yourself in a themed environment for multiple days, doing the activities, eating the food, using the language, hearing the music, and doing the activities of that environment. That immersion, as I said earlier, gives you a sense of being somewhere outside of your normal existence. And it's, for most people, very relaxing and very valuable. This is one of my favorite pictures of all time. That's actually the North Pole. And these are tourists. And they came there on a nuclear-powered Russian icebreaker. Costs $15,000 to $30,000 a person. They go up twice a year. They are dancing around that with classic music. Now, at one time, it was the quest of nations, and many people died getting to the North Pole. Now it's a really popular tourist attraction. Antarctica, same thing, quest of nations. Now over 28,000 tourists go there every year just because it's part of adventure travel. So what happens is pioneers go out there, the developers go out there, the cities, and things happen, then the tourists come. In this case, we don't have cities in these extreme environments, but pioneers go, then the tourists come because they're adventurers. Humanity and people have extraordinary desire to be adventurers. Now the question is, space popular? Well, yeah, as a niche market, this is pretty accurate. Every year we get about 17 million people physically get up, they take their families, and they go to space attractions, whether it's National Space Museum or Space Camp or other places like that. The Johnson Space Center gets pretty good, and what's going to happen with Disney, they get about 4 million people of the 11 million people that go to Disney's Epcot Center taking Mission Space, which is a very fast ride to the moon and back. I'm sorry, to Mars and back. And New York Factory put up about 120 million. This is one of my designs for a Mars resort. This is actually Red Planet Resort Spa. This is separate and in addition to what we're doing with the Mars World project. But you have, of course, an entry system taking you to Mars. This is the resort. And this is a 1,000-foot diameter crater where you get to go in trams and rovers and spacesuits and all kinds of stuff. This is outdoors. But this is a key thing. This is the photo op where you get to wear a spacesuit costume. You're out there with your friends. We're going to have it so... so you can see your face in here, so this will all be lit inside so you can take the photographs and so forth. And Mars World we'll get into next. But Mars World is probably going to happen. It's going to be an extraordinary adventure doing it, and venture for people to come to. Very quickly, what we're doing with Space Tourism Society, we host in 2011 the 10-year anniversary, believe it or not, of Dennis Tito's historic flight. So what we do is we host these major events. We do these core research with Space Tourism Society. We have the official award shows, awards to all the pioneers in space tourism. We've got, this is so outdated, we've got twice as many chapters around the world and in the United States right now. If anybody wants to start a chapter, let me know. In the desert, we're going to be actually building this test center for real space testing and for Mars and Moon testing. That's out just outside the city. We actually almost drove past it on the way out here. We have a seminar series called the Space Experience County Seminars. Larry's been on 2 of them. And we look for a day long at what I'm showing you very quickly and really get into detail with several speakers. And by the end of the day, people have a pretty solid fundamental understanding of where we are, at least at that time, and where there might be opportunities they can participate in business-wise, education-wise. And this is my other favorite quote. I truly believe this. This is fantastic. And there's that. So, one more quick one.
Okay.
More questions? See,
Mars.
Yeah. That's good. I like that. So, this is interesting. Anyone can have an idea, and anyone, if they put the time and persistence in it, and are good with team building, that's the key to success, can probably manifest that idea. Now, it's better, it's easier if you're in West Los Angeles than if you were in Mongolia, for example, but the whole point is everything we see around us, our clothing, this stuff, this gizmo, was invented, was an idea, and eventually happened. So ideas do come to reality. So I had this idea for Mars World about 7 years ago, put together my finance team, and we were that close to getting into serious financing in early 2010, when of course you all know what happened with the world economy. So the last 3 years she's been on hold. We just picked her up again. Beginning of this year, we've got some bankers working, and it's matured to about a $1.8 billion, that's the B word, $1 billion, large-scale mixed-use themed entertainment complex for a 60-acre site in Las Vegas. And this gives you a little sense of some of the activities that you have on Mars. It's a 1,000-foot diameter dome. It will be the world's largest indoor comprehensive space. Geodesic dome. It's the greenest type permanent building you can build. Extraordinary green project, very, very smart. We expect extraordinary sponsors to be involved in it. And the concept is Earth people get to visit Mars in the year 2088. So it's not only traveling to Mars, it's traveling to the future, which lets us play with all kinds of ideas. And ultimately, you come to play on Mars and to meet the Martians. These are Earth people who have been born and raised on Mars, so there's 2 generations. Their big interest is Earth. And they love talking to the Earth people about what Earth is all about. This is all part of the backstory and part of the experience. So our actors and actresses will be tall because of lower gravity and well-trained. So they'll provide a unique experience. Asking a question, for example, what's it like to see clouds? There are no clouds on Mars. A blue sky, how can you stand that huge moon? And the water, what's it like to be out in an ocean where you can't see land? Because in the early days when we go to Mars, there's a lot of water there, but it has to be drilled and mined, and processed, and it's worth more than gold. But eventually, over time, there's more and more resources with water. So this is a water-based culture on Mars. That's all part of the theming that you get into. But ultimately, we're building a global brand, and our little company, Mars World Enterprise, owns the trademark Mars World, which is in itself extraordinary. When we decided to trademark this, believe it or not, no one had ever tried to trademark with the U.S. Trademark Office Mars World. You have Disney World, SeaWorld, Space World, so we were astonished. So we spent the money and the time, and we own that. So we're building a global brand. We call it Next Generation because what we're doing is from day one synergistically looking at all the core mediums that you want to exploit when you're building a worldwide new brand, whether it's real estate or music or merchandise or all these other areas. And fortunately, we're associated with people who built large global brands. And they love this because our future is Mars. My head of finance came up with this statement. It's not science fiction, it's science future. And for there's about 7.5 million projected annual attendance. It's market segments, so people who spend extra money can take a simulated trip to the Mars and landing and so forth, or you can walk into Mars World, it's free, buy a pair of socks in the retail and leave, or spend a week there at the luxury resort hotel and spend $10,000. That's how you have a wide range of market segments that can interact together. There's actually, believe it or not, a guidebook for the trip on Mars. We're going to have this very, very high-tech entry lobby and transition experience we're going to have. When you look inside, you see the crater, which is 1,000 foot in diameter just about. The luxury resort and spa. The spa is going to be beautiful. There's a biosphere in all the habitable areas. Tons of robots, tons of advanced technologies. The Key Club is going to be an extraordinary place where we have these high-tech, futuristic fashion shows. But the ultimate experience is putting on this spacesuit costume and going out with your group and exploring the Mars crater. As you saw earlier, the photo op. We actually have an area where we've simulated where there are Martian caves, and we put airlocks in and put air in it so you can actually walk around these beautiful caves on Mars in your normal clothing. Of course, there's the casino. We're going to do some Mars theming there. Shopping at the Mars Mall. That's just an architectural cross-section. And this is the cool resort in the very center, the dome. At nighttime, you would see an exact replica of what our scientists and astronomers project where Mars would be and what they would see in the outer part of the solar system. So you would see the gas giants, their moons, the asteroid belt, and during the day it's a pink sky, but light because Mars distance to the sun is a lot less. As I said, green, sustainability. I'm just running through this real quick. It's getting kind of hot here. We've got a great team. I'm not going to get into that too much. But here's the schedule. We're going to be raising $9 million between now and the first quarter. Then we put the time and energy into the work that's necessary to go to market for $1.8 billion. Construction financing is half equity, half debt. And we expect to be open in 2018. And how many people have heard of Dennis Tito's Inspiration Mars Foundation and his plan? A number of people, okay. Dennis Tito, as I mentioned earlier, first private space traveler, very smart, very wealthy guy. Beginning of this year, he announced an extraordinary plan, and that is to fly a man and woman, married couple, out to Mars and do a Martian flyby, the same way we're planning the lunar flyby, but this is out to Mars. No landing, just a flyby. And it turns out every 18 years, Earth and Mars get to a certain position where energy-wise you can do that pretty quick return. It's still 500 days. But if he does that, they'll leave on January 5th, 2018 and return on May 21st, 2019. So while they're on their mission, and hopefully they do the mission, and hopefully they survive, no guarantees, we actually have Mars rolled over. And I already talked to Dennis, and we're going to have a grand old party for the Mars Voyagers when they return at Mars. So, real quickly, the Mars rover project's a bold concept, monumental size, so on and so on and so forth. But what I find fascinating, I'm just about finished, is that I live in many different worlds. Design world, science world, finance world, media world, all those kind of things. The high-end finance guys find a project like Mars World extraordinarily exciting because they have done many, many, many conventional projects, whether it's hotels or mixed-use complexes, but they've never been involved in a space project. And space does have that magic of being special and unique and exciting and something that you can tell your friends and family and grandkids about. So we always get a little extra benefit, the fact that we're doing space. But these guys are becoming passionate about this, and this will roll over into financing more real space ventures, real space tourism ventures, and I can see all of this accelerating faster and faster and faster over the next decade or two. So there's going to be a growing space industry, space force industry, and many, many opportunities for anyone who's interested from a huge variety of fields to get directly involved. So the future is just going to be pretty amazing. Okay, that's it.